It's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my creative process here with you on the internet. If you would like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams, I'm currently doing a art book study group on Patreon at patreon.com/GERIMI. It's patreon.com/Jeremy. You get a bonus live stream once a month. I'm actually doing 4 a month right now because I'm doing them every Mondays. You get access to digital versions of all of my comics. You get to see my artwork, work in progress before anyone else. And you also help make these live streams possible. If you'd like to see the best of my social media posts throughout the month, instead of following me on Twitter or Tumblr or Instagram, all the other things, you can get everything delivered to your inbox in a monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. I also share some, new offerings when I have new artwork available to purchase, and other little special goodies that I might share online. And if you'd like to actually purchase physical copies of my comics, or if you read digitally on Amazon Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. I'll forward you to my Amazon author page. What is on my Amazon author page, you might ask? I have physical copies of the first graphic novel I published, Eye of the Gods. This book is a self-contained graphic novel. It's a psychological thriller about a man he is cursed with visions he can't control. He can look through other people's eyes and see what they are seeing, but he can't control when or where. He witnesses a murder, only to find out it's being reported in the news as a death by natural causes. So that book is available on there in print and digital. Then my current series I'm working on, Morning Star, which is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. Morning Star is an 8-issue series. This volume contains issues 1 through 4 of this dramatic, supernatural, biblical Western. It's a reimagining of Lucifer's Fall from Heaven. It also has an additional sketchbook in the back featuring the original character designs, thumbnails, excerpts of script pages, all that available at amazon.jeremy.net. And before we jump into our conversation today, I want to give a quick shout out to new patrons on Patreon. We've got Shane, frequent guest on the chat. He's supporting, and also Zolid Snake. So thank you guys so much for becoming patrons and making this video possible for all of our viewers. So thank you guys so much for becoming. I hear the audio in the back. And now we have some oh wait, I gotta turn the banners off. Start 2021 off with leaving banners up on the screen. So, returning guests, Amar and Vince Moore, artist, writer, creator Amar, and writer, editor, storyteller extraordinaire Vince Moore, former retail maven, comics journalist. So I always love having conversations with these guys, and I thought this would be fun to have them on with us as we discuss goals for 2021. So welcome, guys. Welcome, Amar.
Thanks for having me.
And Vince, welcome.
Good morning.
So, as usual, I'm just going to have my screen on. Let me switch to the little side screen. Actually, we can switch around in terms of, because I know Amar also has stuff he's working on that that he wants to share. But one of my new patrons, Shane, reached out early on in the year and said that he wanted to hear about what my goals were for 2021. So I can jump into mine, but I was curious. Amar, let's start with you. Do you have any goals that you've set so far for 2021? We can just sort of let this be a kind of a broad-ranging conversation, let it go where it goes. But let's start with you, Amar. What are you thinking for 2021? Any goals, any resolutions?
Oh, I have a lot. I'm going to start with my list. I got a little list on my tablet here. So the first thing was I wanted to commit to a program, because what generally happens is I'll, after work, do some drawing or some doodling for some animation, or try to work on some comic stuff or some animation related stuff or whatever. So I said, I have 52 weeks in this year. Let's do this. We're going to take an hour every week and we're going to multiply it or add it. So we got 52 weeks. By the time the 52nd week hit in the year, I should have spent at least 52 hours every week after that. So in 2022, I'll be spending 52 hours to maybe 60 hours a week working on these different things. I want to draw for an hour, so that can be anything like practice, animate for an hour, write for an hour, study game dev for an hour, draw comics for an hour, animate my series because I have different animation series that I'm working on. Write for my comic for an hour, and work on game dev projects for an hour. So altogether, that's 8 different things. And based on my estimates, that should be at least almost a little over 6 hours a day at the end of the 52 weeks that I'll end up spending at the end of the year. So by 2022, if this goes the way it plans, or I'm not going to say when it goes as planned, then it'll end up being 6 hours dedicated every week as a habit. So that's the first thing I want to do as far as a goal, is establish that habit. Because right now it's sort of like all over the place. And then what I'm going to probably end up doing is after the stream, probably go to Staples. If not, go to Amazon and just buy like a big whiteboard because I got a small one, but I need one right over my computer so I can just check off that I've done this. So that way I have something staring me in the face, and then I can just check it off as I do it. So that's the first thing. So I have some more, but I'm gonna go ahead and let Vince talk, and then I can get into the other things.
Okay, and also I do see people coming in the chat. Hey Trevor, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Happy New Year. And just so you guys know, because the three of us are on here talking, I may not be as responsive. We'll try to check in every once in a while, but we're probably going to get caught up in just John, so we may not get to as many questions and comments. But know that we're keeping an eye out for you, and we'll try to get to them over the course of the show. Vince, please.
Right now, my goals are to actually figure out what I'm doing. I bought something called a high performance planner. It's one of those week planners, but it's designed to track your goals and whatnot. And the first week I realized I couldn't keep a goal. So what I'm doing right now, because so many things are fluid, is I'm actually using it to actually keep a track of what I'm actually doing so that I can begin to get a better grasp on what I need to do. As the first thing. Beyond that, there's the boat in the basement project that I've actually last year was really good for me developing some of those ideas. And so that's my main focus right now, but I'm also picking up some editing work, and I've got a couple of pitches I want to throw out at least one publisher just to see what nibbles I can get. But that's really where my goals for 2021 are to continue building the boat in the basement, at least until I have to figure out how to blow up the basement to get the boat out, as I call it. But that I think that's an interesting exploration because it's partly evolved into something where I'm playing with different methods. And since we're going to end up talking process, I think that's a good place to kind of trail it off, is that I'm realizing that I'm playing around with plotting different characters in one story using slightly different methods because I'm finding that is opening me up to modes of thinking. Best example, I've had it for a while, but I decided a couple of weeks ago to play around with the plot whisperer method. And her method isn't really that novel as much as, she makes the pitch that it is. She's basically doing her version on the hero's journey stuff. She just doesn't call it that. But what I found interesting in going through some of the elements of her system is that it would be a kind of great way for me to plot a couple of female characters, because there were ways she was interpreting how a character should behave under a set of circumstances that I would have never thought of. And I had come close to abandoning using it. I thought it was just a useless experiment, but I sat and I said, well, wait a minute, here's something she's got in her book of writing prompts. For example, it's like, oh, well, have a situation where your character pursues a goal, it blows up in their face, but then they turn around and essentially want to blame everybody else. And I scratched my head for a second and I said, I would have never thought to even have a character do that. Um, quite honestly, we get into our grooves. We, as creators, we have types of characters that we love, and they find their way into our work. And I'm such a go-getter, success-oriented kind of character person that the idea of a character basically going, well, the situation blew up in my face and it's that person's fault. It would never have occurred to me as a way to turn the story.
Because, I mean, we're moving away from the idealized hero into the flawed hero, more into, the somewhat where it's a flaw that you would not have thought to assign to a character, even though it's a very human thing that we often see in our daily lives all the time.
Yeah. And so and I was kind of glad that I was bullheaded enough to want to continue to do that. So I think, if anything, that would be an implicit goal for this year, is to play around with enough different ideas to make sure that I try to do the best that I can to explore the landscape of characters. In terms of opening up storytelling possibilities.
I like that. I mean, anytime I can get myself into a headspace of trying to do more with characters or look at them from angles I would have thought of, I look at that as a positive. And to be honest, I've heard the plot, like the name of the plot whisperer before, but I've never looked into that. And you just mentioned that alone. Again, even if it's nothing but a series of writing prompts in the book, it's worth me, I think, checking out, just for anytime I hear somebody trying something out new and like, oh, hey, it's a new way. Anything that opens doors, I'm game for. It's just fun.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that one of the books that she offers is a whole book of writing prompts that essentially covers essentially an arc for a full story. And so that's the experiment, is that I have other characters that I'm using different methods to plot with, but what if I took at least one character and just followed the writing prompts? And then, if for nothing else, just to see how that character's behavior by following the writing prompts through the whole story impacts the main character.
So almost like giving them sort of an episodic journey of their own, but it's almost like looking at how these sort of different episodes can be exploited within the larger structure of the main character's narrative.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah. That feels like a fun experiment. I mean, I honestly, how long do you think it's going to take for you to write this particular story? Is this something that's going to wind over several months? Is this something that's
it's going to be a bit of a big, that's what it's part of the boat in the basement. And that's why it doesn't have a set time period. I could probably do a smaller experiment with it, and that would probably be the smarter thing. I'm not known for being the smart guy. And so that might be, it would be interesting. I think even just that book of prompts alone, even just playing with one prompt, because it would be unfamiliar territory for me. In the sense, because again, it sounds weird to always talk about it, but well, look, it's reality. Men and women do see things differently. And one of the reasons why, particularly the last few years, I wanted to do more reading about writing from female authors' perspectives was the idea that it would introduce, number one, I don't have a writers group. And so I'm not really interacting with somebody. Let's say, oh, I'm doing a female character here. How about you read it? And I actually work better from textbooks, from books. If you give me a template to follow, I can play with it, and so it's part of that experiment to start reading more authors. There was another great book that I've got to dig a little bit more into called The Woman in the Story. And it, promised to be a way of designing female characters it even mentioned a different take on a heroine's journey. The thing that I found more interesting about this woman is she devotes in that book, she devotes a whole chapter to basically saying, well, we know stories are supposed to be about conflict, but conflict really isn't what women or some percentage of the audience are really interested in. They're more interested in the idea of how things come together. So I want to introduce this idea of moments of union, and it would be a counterpoint to conflict. And that seemed interesting to explore. And then I really thought about it in terms of using Dan O'Bannon's simple dynamic method of simply saying, okay, fine. He says a story is built on just a certain number of questions. What's the conflict? When does it kick in? What's the big turning point? How's it resolved? And applying it to this idea of union. And saying, okay, fine. What union does the character face in his world? When is it introduced? How does it become deeper? Or how does it become estranged? How does that resolve itself? And then by doing that, again, that gave me a couple of options to play with. So there's a lot of experimenting going on, but that's why I wanted to read more female authors. And so the plot whisperer method, I've been shaking my head at it because on the one hand, she says it's the hero's journey without calling it the hero's journey. She's indefinite in the main book on how to get you through a whole story, but then the book of writing prompts essentially does that. Where it's basically she gives you a list of total 120 prompts. And I even found somebody who said they basically plotted a whole novel using that method of just following the prompts. And so that's what kept me digging in on that. And so I would probably want to do a smaller experiment where maybe I take 1 or 2 prompts and string it together and just see how it works. But I'm a nut, and so I'm just going to end up I'm a nut, so I'm just going to end up doing it in the bigger project, but I may play around with it in other ideas.
Well, the specific reason why I asked about how the time frame is because I know it could be something short, it could be something long, and I'd be curious to see if you were to do a short project, I'd be curious to see the before and then check in with you with the after to see how it worked, and if it were a longer, like several months project, just to check in down the line and see how that how it shook out. But I've made a quick list of goals myself, and I'll tell you, I'm going to do the first 2 because you're looking at one of them right now. My original goal, my first goal is to finish Morningstar, which was a goal for 2020. My goal is to wrap this series up, and I obviously didn't make it. However, this page we're working on right here, this is page 34 out of 40. So I'm in the home stretch in terms of inking it. I still have to go back and gray tone all of it. And I know if Carl Altstetter ends up hearing this, he's going to sigh because he's like, why are you doing this? Because there's a I was texting to him over the holidays, and I was telling Carl that that I sent him a shot of a splash page I did. And I said, what do you do when you're trying to make a money shot and it ends up coming out a dookie shot? Like, I just was not happy with the way that splash page came out, and he gave me some support. He didn't do the tough love. He just said, you know what, you look at this, look at that, you could change a couple of things here, but no, I don't think it's that bad. Then I got home and I did what I should have done in the first place, which was shot some reference. Because it's specifically a lighting issue, and it was a little bit of an anatomy issue, but it was mostly a lighting issue. Once I lit my little gray figures, I was able to look at it and say, oh, okay, this is how the lighting should fall on these forms. If I want it to look correct, I should do that. And I could just go in and fix that by whiting out the parts that were bad and re-inking the parts where the shadows should be. But also, when I shot with my little figures, I looked at the poses I originally did for the figures are just really awkward. And I thought, if I'm going to do all that, I might as well just redraw the whole thing. So and you know that's the bane of comic creators. You can't just keep stopping and saying, I need to go back and fix this. I need to redraw. You start redrawing every little thing, you will nitpick your project apart.
Oh,
That said, because it's a splash page, that's what made me say I need to go back and fix this. I think if it was just a couple of wonky panels inside a comic page, we wouldn't even be talking about it, because I was supposed to say, well, those are some wonky panels, and I just moved on. Which is something I think I'm getting better at. That's something that in 2020, I try to find the balance between what is really improving the page versus me just wanting to let perfectionism slow down the process.
Me, because but once it gets to the ink stage, I'm done. Not going back.
Now, see, I am notorious for, in each issue, there's always at least 5 panels, not full pages. There's always at least 5 panels where I will just reprint out my blue lines on a separate piece of Bristol board, and I'll go back and I'll re-ink, whole panels of pages. It's rare for me to go back and do that for an entire page, but in this case, because it's a splash page, I feel like the splash pages, you owe it to the reader to put some extra love in it. And it's not that it is an unpublishable page. I looked at it and I'm like, I know I can do better. And normally in a sequential page, I will let that, it took me a long time, it's taken me years to get there, but I will now let a page that I know could be better, I'll let it go. But a splash page, I'm like, come on. That's what people come to the books for.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna redraw that page. But it's funny, in talking about writing and the writing process, the plot whisperer and all that. My first goal for 2020, once I wrap up Morningstar, is that I am going to actually publish a book on outlining. Because I don't know about you guys, but for the most part, I do encounter people who look at outlining as a necessary evil. And I encounter people who look at outlining as they hate it, they refuse to do it, and it's boring. For me, it is very rare. I think maybe I can count on one hand the number of people who actually love outlining. And I love outlining.
Are you referring to when you just plotting out the different stories for the different books?
Yes, but for me, it's beyond the way that this whole thing, that me wanting to do a book about it, came about was simply for me trying to pay attention to what content people seem to enjoy from me the most. And my second most popular video on YouTube is a video that I made that shows how I write a comic book from start to finish. And what I did was I took the first issue of Morningstar and I put together visuals. I put together a slideshow, and I just showed how I start with a simple plot summary, which that's just the start of the outlining. It's just, the paragraph or two outlining your premise, your characters, and your beginning, middle, and end of a story. That's it. 2 sentences for beginning, 2 sentences for complication, 2 sentences for resolution. That's like the start. That's just my story summary. Then when I go into my outlining process, I do a page-by-page beat sheet, just a bullet point of what's going on in there. And I see a couple more guys in the chat. I see Jesse's in there. How you doing, Jesse? Thanks for popping in. I also see Joseph's there. Thanks for coming by, guys. We're talking 2020 goals or 2021 goals. See, the problem is 2020 was so easy to say. Now switching to 2021 is going to be a pain in the butt. But so one of my most popular YouTube videos is about me just going through my process of, story summary, bullet points, and then how I break the bullet points themselves into the actual panels on the page. For me, it's just the simple outlining process they teach you in school when you're learning how to do reports, and they teach you that just doing the bullet points and the sub bullet points and the sub bullet points. That's all it is. It's classic high school outlining, but it's how I apply that to comic books. But for some reason, that video, people that's one of the ones people really love, and they felt like it really clarified and simplified the outlining process. And that,
I was gonna say, are you gonna include the how to do the actual Bible and all the other stuff too for the overall outlining as part of the outlining?
I may well get into that, because I'll tell you, I didn't really I sort of created a story Bible in the sense that the original Morningstar sketchbook that I published before I published issue 1 had a short essay on how I came about the story, and then it has my early character designs. It has my and my character descriptions, and then just a little bit of extra writing here and there, and that's the and so that for me is kind of my equivalent of a Bible. But the fact that you mentioned that, I'm going to write that down also, because my plan is also with people on Patreon and maybe some of the folks in the newsletter. What I'll do is I'll share early copies of early drafts of it to get feedback and see, you know, what's useful, what's not useful, what am I missing, and kind of refine it. But it's really, the book is going to be me taking that video, putting it into book format, and then taking the other thing I had intended to do, which was to take all of my thumbnails for all of issue 1 of Morningstar, and then show that transition from thumbnail, like put the full script in, the full thumbnails, and show how I went from where the writing part ends to translate that into the visuals.
Yeah, because I know everyone has their process, but generally, and I'm pretty sure Vince has this process as well, but generally, like my approach is, whether it's from like a place or a character that you start with, I basically start building characters around them and or the universe around them, and then I build all the attributes in, and then build the attributes of the environment in, and create a Bible, and then you can start to get stories from that. Whether it's going to be like they're part of their backstory, or you're just going to jump into some action, or whatever it is, and you have like that guide that you can go back to. And if you get really deep into it, you can do, I don't know if you're going to get as deep as Star Wars, but you can get to the point where you can have the actual visuals for the backgrounds, the visuals for the characters, and the outfits or whatever they're going to have, like have them go from childhood to adult. You can have that stuff baked in there. So you have all that material available. And then when you start doing your plots and your outline, you'll be able to have something to work with there as well. I mean, I know everybody does things different, because some people don't even really have a script sometimes. They just kind of start and they just have something really loose when they're doing their comics. So,
well, it sounds to me like you have a more organic, fluid process in terms of you've got the world building, and then you sort of, the story comes out of that world. Is that kind of correct in terms of your approach?
Yeah, I mean, I have some idea as far as what I want to do. This one I kind of don't like. As far as the series that I'm working on now, I kind of like where I'm starting with it now, because originally the idea was sort of like kind of matrixy. It was going to start out with the action, but I'm kind of going into the backstory of it now. So I kind of wish I started out in the action, because it seems like most people, when you come to the comics, they don't really like the soap opera stuff, you know, depending on the age. So they probably more so like to jump right into the action part. And it seemed like there'll be a lot of missing, I don't know if I would call it plot holes, but a lot of missing stuff to the character that people have to really, I guess, hang on to or follow along in order to really get into that character, because the character is kind of OP, you know. You know, it's like a Dr. Manhattan or stronger type character. One of the characters. I mean, you're familiar with them. The character Lilith that I have, and then the character Snow that I have. So both of those characters are really OP. So it's kind of hard to write stories about them without, you know, you having a little backstory or the reason why they're doing some of the things they're doing. So I don't know if that's the best approach. I'm kind of figuring that out as I go. But you know,
when you say OP, just for clarification, what do you mean?
Overpowered.
Overpowered. Okay.
I mean, he's from well, if you look at Marvel, they have the Celestials. The Celestials to me are basically angels.
Yeah.
So he has that same biology inside of his makeup, and he also has like the control over matter. So it's like all matter. So, and he's also figuring out his powers as he age. he doesn't really age, but as he get older, because he was given the power of I don't know if you're familiar with Epoch, but Epoch is one of the angels in my universe. He's one of the angels that is like the we call him like the librarian. He has like all of the knowledge of the heavens, and he's sort of like infused this into his son. So his son is going through this whole discovery of this knowledge as he aged, and he's going throughout the universe learning about all these things that his father has taught him before he passed on. Because his father, since he had, I know I'm giving away some of the information, since his father had relations or sex or whatever you want to call it with a like a young virgin girl in Africa, what ended up happening was it created, he turned into a, what do we call it, like the first generation of Nephilim. So they have like this transformation because they wasn't supposed to actually mate with humans. And Snow is basically like a Nephilim, but it's not like a typical Nephilim. So he's like, he almost has like direct lineage like Lilith does, because Lilith was created in the heavens and was implanted on the earth by God. So she was born at the same time the Milky Way was born 14 billion years ago. So,
by the way, do you want me to switch to having your screen up, because I've been showing mine for a while, Drawn. I know you.
This will get into some of the other stuff as far as other projects, but I'm just explaining the reasoning behind that. And Vince and you guys may have a different perspective on this or how you would approach it. But for me, since these characters have to be kind of abstract and introducing it, jumping right into them like just fighting and showing how OP they are, it'll kind of have like a Dragon Ball Z sort of thing going on. It's like you just see these people with crazy powers doing all this stuff, but it will not be like any story. So I'm trying to give some sort of backstory to it. So the first issue starts off with him as a boy talking with his father about what happened and why it happened, and that's the fall. And then after that, it goes into like this next episode where Lilith is going out and looking for the archangels, and then as she's doing that, Snow is learning how to use his powers. So I don't know. It's kind of going to be like a lot of discovery for me for this, how to write it, so it'll be appealing for people. But it's my first series I'm gonna go through, and I have 14 more issues to do. I did start my fourth issue during the Christmas break, so hopefully the goal is for this year too is to try to get through all 16 issues written. I know I told you that like a year or so ago. It hasn't been fluent. It hasn't been as easy to write all those issues out as easy as I thought they were going to be. So.
Well, I mean, it never is, but that's why we make the goals, because at least if we shoot for the stars, at least maybe we can touch the sky. But I'm curious if you've spent much time reading any of Chris Claremont's X-Men work.
No, I haven't.
Because Claremont, I mean, Vince, again, this is where having a comic journalist on the show really, really comes through. Because the short point is that Claremont excels at character development through action. That's I'd say that's probably the absolute of all the things he's great at. That and the soap opera are the two pillars, the two strongest pillars you could say when it comes to Claremont's writing.
Oh yeah, I mean he really mastered. Well, I mean, look, in a lot of ways, most writing systems that you get into, they ultimately all end up agreeing that character is plot anyway. And so that is where the character development through their actions really comes out of, is the idea is that this character is going to be, the basic idea is just as you could give any three creators, let's say, the same basic idea, you're going to get three different stories. Why? Because they're going to bring their personalities into play. They're going to bring their interests into play. And that's going to take that basic plot and shift it in respective ways depending on what the individual creator is involved in. And so it's one of the reasons why so many systems ultimately end up agreeing on so many points, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's really what it is, I say tomato, you say Roma, somebody else says fried green tomato, but at the end of the day, it's all still a tomato in its essence. It is really what it gets to. And so Claremont's good to study because, yeah, he knows how to bring character development, really not so much character development as characterization, I think is a better way of phrasing it. It's characterization. If something happens to Wolverine and it's Claremont writing, he's going to tackle that thing as Wolverine. How is Wolverine going to handle it? So Wolverine's going to take being insulted a whole different way from Colossus being insulted, let's say. Colossus is going to think about back on the family farm and how it was, and Professor X has saved him, and that he's peaceable at heart, even though he's this big burly dude. It can become even bigger, and so he doesn't really want to fight. Versus scrappy Wolverine, if you step on his toe, if you stepped on his new Nikes, that claw is coming out and hitting you. First thing, there's no ifs, no ands, no buts. That is his character. You've seen what his action does. Then his character determines his action. Same thing with Colossus. And then the development happens over time of, you do see, okay, here's a set of circumstances that maybe that's not the solution. You could say the Wolverine Mariko romance was a perfect example where his normal character of how to resolve a problem was the worst thing that could happen as to how to develop that romance. So that's how Claremont uses that to expand Wolverine's character, to show that, he does have other sides to him. His essence doesn't change, but he at least learns to adapt enough to certain circumstances to win Mariko.
Yeah,
which is why the walking away from the wedding was such a powerful moment, because it's like, well, wait a minute. We've seen Wolverine adapt to come closer to you, Mariko, and now you've thrown him to the side. Oh, wait a minute. And thus reader interest keeps going.
So I just wanted to add, in reference to what I was just talking about, that with the character, the reason why I was doing it in the second book, also I wouldn't call it so much it is sort of like a backstory, but not so much a backstory, is with Lilith. I want to try to introduce her, show that she's real cunning and she's also real arrogant, because she knows and understands her powers and abilities, and how really strong she is. On comparison, in some ways, she's more powerful than Samael. And Samael, as you know, is the archangel that they also call Lucifer, Morningstar, and the devil, and all that other stuff. So she's able to go anywhere in time, and she's like the original first mage, and she has a whole other litany of powers. So I'm trying to show a little bit of that in the book without getting into the actual fighting stuff. So just have people get into the character and understand the character, and then show Snow's flaws, because he's trying to understand, even though he has all this knowledge and he's been living for so long and he's so powerful, he still doesn't fully understand his capabilities yet. And he doesn't really understand all the knowledge. Even though he has his knowledge, it's like you can plug into the matrix and you have all the knowledge in the world, but you don't know how to use it. So it's like, once he starts to understand how to use that knowledge, he's going to become even more powerful. So that's the whole idea behind it. So showing that in writing is going to be a challenge, but that's the reason why I think I want to take that approach, to try to get people to get more into the character versus just coming to see some cool stuff flying around in the panels.
I mean, I'm a fan. I use flashbacks liberally. Perhaps I'm on the verge of overuse. In fact, it might be interesting for me to do a project at one point where I forbid myself from doing flashbacks just because. But my whole thing is I rely heavily on that show don't tell, in that if there's something interesting, if for me, exposition is never boring, because what I just think is, what is the coolest thing about the information I need to share? And then I just draw a picture of the cool thing. So if you want to hint to some of their backstory, but you don't want to be boring, then it's like, I would just be like, not even a whole flashback scene. We just do like, you've got a normal page where you have the person have two characters having a conversation about blah, blah, blah. And it was like, this is 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. And in the middle of that page, you might just have one panel that is, and maybe make that like a larger panel, but make it a panel of like some dope character energy swirling, destroying a bunch of foes. But that's just like maybe one tier in the middle of the 3 tiers of like, you've got 3 tiers of talking heads above, dope shot in the middle, that's a flashback, and then 3 tiers of talking heads below. Just in that idea that exposition doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's only, in fact, exposition is only exposition when it's not interesting. If you're doing it interesting, it's just storytelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
No. Yeah, so that's what I think I'm going to be. It's not. I'm going to have some flashbacks, but it's mostly going to be telling their story, or their journey of how they got to where they get to. Because the ultimate goal, as you know, the story is to have the second fight, Samael versus Heaven, and Lilith has her own plan, and Snow has his own plan, and we'll see what happens with that. But that's the overall goal, is to try to tell the character story and not so much just to get into having a lot of cool action. Now, there will be some cool action in there, but I just felt like if I start out there, then that's what everybody's going to be coming for. If they come to it just to see that, and it's not going to be much to tell about the story, because it's sort of like with me when I look at Superman, they had to create Superman, try to find some kind of way to make Superman flawed, but he's not really flawed unless you use the kryptonite, so it's like when you have characters that you create like that, it's kind of hard to find ways to tell a story unless you create some kind of way that they're flawed, and then you can exploit that flaw by using it with regular characters or non-OP characters. So.
Well, I'll disagree with that slightly. It depends on the time period you're reading Superman. One of the things that I've been doing lately is going back and reading a lot of the Mort Weisinger edited stuff. And one of the more interesting and that's Superman at his most maximally powerful. That's the guy who can, the
original one.
Well, I'm talking about the Silver Age stuff. So the late 50s through the 60s. And so this is the planet mover. This is the guy who can travel through time. But what's interesting when you look at the stories from a creator's point of view, one of the funny things that happens is you begin to realize that it doesn't matter how powerful Superman is, he is actually a slave to the story that's being told. The best example that I have is that, because it sticks in my mind, is there's one of those stories where essentially it was the punchline is that Batman decided to create a mystery for Superman to solve for Superman's birthday. And that involved Batman breaking into the Fortress of Solitude. There was a moment when I went back to read that, and granted, you do remember that these were written primarily for kids.
By the way, I love that that's David Fincher's Batman. Yeah. It's Batman doing the game with Superman.
Yeah. Well, but here's what's funny, though, is that when I'm reading it as an adult, as an editor, as a writer, there were moments where I sat there and I said, well, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense in the sense of, hey, Superman has X-ray vision and super hearing. How in the hell did he just not go, someone seems to have broken into the Fortress of Solitude. Let me go out, scan the whole thing with my X-ray vision and my super hearing to see who's in here. But then I thought about it, I said, but then that kills the story. The whole process is Superman has to actually think his way through the story. And that's one of the things about Mort Weisinger's take editorially and for those writers that seems to have disappeared after Denny O'Neil did his run. is the idea of Superman is that for all of the powers, he still has to think his way through a problem. And that's essentially what a story is.
So my question to that is, because I usually find that in movies a lot too, and I usually associate that sometimes as a plot hole. It's like things you already know and understand about something, but in the midst of the movie. So like if you was take let's say the last the Avengers movie where they killed Thanos. So it's like
spoilers. I'm kidding.
Oh,
I'm kidding. I'm just playing. Continue.
Everybody should have saw that by now. But anyway, so with that one, if you want to say spoilers, okay, spoilers, whatever. The thing is for me looking at that, I know that's the story that they've written, but realistically, when you look at it, it's a lot of plot holes in there, understanding the power levels and what the abilities of the Infinity Stones and some of the other things that in the story that they did that made them victorious, which fell flat for me. I mean, for some, it was really great. They loved it because it was entertaining. They loved all the special effects, and they have a lot of moments where they appease the fans. But you know, in the scope of the universe and story, and also Thanos being the character that he is, I was like, wait a minute, this is the greatest villain that you guys had thus far, and this is what you do with him. So I don't know. I'm not a fan of always the happy ending, but I am a fan of the payoff, and I feel like the payoff wasn't there because they could have built it up even more. Maybe even had another number two. I mean, a number three or number four, and then build it up to the point where they can bring in these characters that in the Marvel universe that can actually fight against the Stones and win. The way it went is just okay. It was so like a head scratcher moment. So I mean I get what you're saying as far as the slave to the story. It's just sometimes they create characters where this, like you said, he can see through walls, or he has X-ray visions, and he has this extraordinary hearing, but they choose not to use that because it's like, okay, if you use that, then it defeats the story. So, but everybody has a opinion of it, but I just think sometimes when they do that, it creates a plot hole. Maybe certain people may not see it as a plot hole, but it just feels like, okay, there could have been a little more creative ways to address that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. I don't know.
Well, no, but see, that's why I said that story particularly was a revelation about Superman being a slave to the story, because the thing is that for all of his powers, he still had to go through the process of essentially going, someone has broken into my home. And you see Superman go through the emotions of who is it? Why is it? This person's leaving mysterious messages. They say they know who I am. So you see Superman go through conflicts that his powers are useless against. You see him be afraid at that moment a little bit. Who is this? Be a little confused. And then in the course of the story, that's why I say he's a slave to the story, because the story gives you just enough elements to essentially go, here's why his powers wouldn't necessarily be good at this point. At one point he mentions the fact that, well, I could have used my X-ray vision, except I picked the mountain for the Fortress of Solitude because it had certain amounts of lead in it, and there's areas that are shielded, so somebody could be in those areas and I'd have to hand search them. It does try to explain why his powers were essentially useless and why he has to use his head.
Vince, can I jump in?
Yeah.
The other thing is that there's also the idea of using an overpowered character's powers against them. In the Superman example, you can have the thing where, let's say that he can just use his X-ray vision to look through the wall. He looks through the wall, and in this case, it's Batman. But let's say that some opponent is setting up a trap or a cat and mountain, an obstacle. they may set up something for Superman to see that will be intentionally misleading.
No, that's what I mean. The story does enough stuff to make sure that it's not easy for like one of the punchlines is, oh, well, Batman's hiding spot was behind the duplicate giant Joker penny, which just so happened to be made of lead. so that's what I mean is that he's a slave to the story in the sense that he has to work through the steps despite his powers.
So I have a question then. So jumping back to and I can see the logic in that. What about when they use a plot device, and I'm gonna just go back to the Infinity War saga, when they use time, they use the element of time just to win the fight. You know, what do you guys think of that? You know, because it seemed like they use that as an excuse to win the fight, and they had so many other options.
Well, but number one, when you're talking about movie, well, look, at the end of the day, everybody is telling stories, but the medium is a big participant into how you tell a story. So we're talking about a film. And particularly the last two Avengers movies were supposed to be the payoff for the introduction of the Marvel Universe. It's going to feature 1 million characters and whatnot. So it's an ensemble cast movie. When you look at Infinity War and Endgame, you have to realize that segments of those movies are specifically designed as showcases for certain characters. The time travel heist is totally built around Ant-Man. As a storyteller. And so at that point, they are just focused on the fact that we've got to travel through time and space to steal the gems, to make our own gauntlet. And so they give an explanation that's just enough for the audience to buy into it, in the sense of, okay, remember all those time travel movies? Notice they say movies. All these other time travel movies you have seen that say if you sneeze on a butterfly in the past, it changes everything irrevocably. Yeah, no, that's all hogwash.
Yeah,
that's not how time travel really would work. Well, once they give you that explanation, that justifies everything else that they do in the rest of the story, and that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's just like I'm thinking of this glove in one movie. He's almost omnipotent, and he has these other omni powers, and in the other movie, it's all like subtracted. It's all like, okay, none of that means anything anymore.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, because particularly if you study the screenwriters, they freely say that Infinity War is told from the perspective of Thanos is the hero. So that's why he wins. Then once you get to Endgame, no, he's the bad guy. That's why he loses. Period. End of sentence. His position in the story, and this gets so meta at this point, his position in the story from hero to villain between the two movies is why he schools the Avengers through the first movie and gets schooled by them through the second.
Yeah.
Period.
I don't see, that's sort of like, and if I was to do that in comics, it's like you would expect the reader, because the reader has more time, I guess, to digest it than maybe a movie. I don't know. It depends on how many times you watch the movie. But in the comics, that the reader be a little bit more intelligent and pick that up and say, "Oh, that's some BS." You know,
it is the opposite. It's the exact opposite. The comic book that someone sits down and reads in 30 minutes, you've spent 30 hours thinking about. So you have the advantage of being able to think about all of the objections your reader will have, and that it's like being a mystery writer. The whole point of the advantage of a mystery writer is the mystery writer gets to think about all of these questions beforehand and answer the questions and look at, well, if I do this, it does that. The reader is simply going to read it, and as long as nothing pings them as, oh, this doesn't make any sense, the reader will just be like, okay, that's fine. there's tons of plot holes in stuff that I've written that no one's ever called me on, and I'm like, I keep waiting for the day someone to bust me on them, and no one ever does. So if someone wants to do a deep dive on my books and come at me, you're welcome to, because I know they're there.
Yeah. Well, also that's the other funny thing about story is that once you've basically said this person's on this team and this person's on that team, that essentially determines how your audience takes it. Let's say we've all read a Batman comic. Man, we love it when the Joker is making mayhem. But if the Joker ultimately won, we'd be madder than hell. We know that Batman it's his book. He is supposed to win the day. He can get punched in the gut all the way through as long as he wins in the end. If it's a Joker book, conversely, the Joker has to do the same thing. He has to win in the end. And that's really the position we have. As long as we sell it, we're going to get into some wrestling terminology here. As long as you sell it well, the audience is not going to question it. It's when you don't sell it well, that the audience doesn't question it, and to finish out using the last two Avengers movies as the example, because the audience was left in shock at the end of Infinity War, most of them came into Endgame subconsciously rooting for the Avengers to stomp all over Thanos. Period. End of sentence.
See, I'm glad I wasn't the director or the writer. Because I would have gave him another dose of like, this is reality. You don't always win in reality. But then I would, since you usually use the trilogy, I'll probably use the trilogy to have the payoff and then bring in the character, because to me, Captain Marvel wasn't really strong enough to really do what was needed. They have so many other characters that you have in the universe that could actually take out Thanos with the gauntlet. Yeah. And the way they played that is
no, but see, that's what I'm saying is you get into the idea of everybody. If we're going to try to analyze from the perspective of what were the screenwriters going into, see, this is what I mean. The medium changes what you're looking for in terms of story to a certain extent. What they were looking for, particularly when doing Endgame, was how do we pay off X number of elements that have been going around since the first Iron Man movie. Certain things. Why does Cap get to wield Mjolnir? Because that was set up in Age of Ultron. Why does Tony sacrifice himself in the end? Because that was set up in the first Iron Man movie. In the sense of how does he's the ultimate in selfish men. So having to learn to do the heroic thing is exactly what Tony Stark needed to do. Why does he take the Infinity Glove and basically kill himself to rid the universe of Thanos? Because Cap said, you're not the guy who would lay down on the wire for somebody else. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, I see all of that stuff you're saying. I mean, it paid off for the fans.
Yeah.
But for me,
it paid off for the movie fans.
Yeah, for some of the comic fans as well. But I just look at it like, you comparing it to the comics, and you comparing it to the way the power level is in comics, it didn't equal. So I was like,
well, it can't. It can't. Remember. That's why I say the medium shapes the story. In comics, you have.
But if you were the director, you saying you couldn't still follow that same?
No, not in film. Because in film, well, number one, when you're dealing with film, you're dealing with a storytelling medium that reaches the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And so the masses, larger, aren't going to be satisfied by 3 movies worth of Thanos. 2 movies was enough. remember that Endgame was originally, what did they say? They had a 3.5-hour cut.
Mm-hmm.
So there was another hour's worth of stuff in there, and probably a good chunk of it was with Thanos. But they knew they couldn't do that. They had to pay it off.
Did three, if not 4 Iron Mans, and 3, if not 4 Captain Americas. I don't know. I think I see it a little bit different. I mean,
because they're the hero.
300 million. I'm pretty sure I will have 3 different movies with with Thanos, and then make the story interesting, because I feel like it's so, Marvel is so vast, and they have so many OP characters that they could have introduced. Like they had Adam Warlock. They introduced him inside of what was that?
They set it up.
Yeah, they set it up. They set it up, and I think the second.
It's Guardians. It's second Guardians
movie. So it could have been him. They could have introduced Thanos' son at some point. It's a whole bunch of different characters they could have introduced.
Oh yeah.
I just felt like it was so much more. And then it seemed like they was just trying to appease a lot of people in that. And that's the thing, as a writer or a person that does comics, and even trying to do animation as well. Do you work to always appease the fans and say, okay, I'm gonna give them this payoff because people always want to see somebody win at the end?
Well, Amar, I'm of 2 thoughts, but 2 separate thoughts on what you just laid out there, which is, one, the fact that you're asking all these questions, in my mind, that's a diagnostic tool for your own writing. You can use that. The fact that you watch the story and you're looking at, you feel like the resolution and the power levels don't line up with how the story panned out. It just the fact of thinking about a Marvel movie or any superhero movie and saying, well, that's not how I would have done it. It should have been like this. To let your mind wander and say, well, this would have made more sense. To not just say, to call out the first things that weren't working, but to literally think through, all right, how would I have done this? And then once you say, how would I have done this? To further say, how satisfying would that be to watch? Because that whole thing of the question you're asking about, to apply to the second thing, the question you're asking of, do you write for logic and what makes sense, or do you write to appease the fans? I think that you write to create a story that is satisfying for everyone involved. It's a story that's actually satisfying for you as a storyteller to tell, but also satisfying for the reader. So I always try to start with, what do I want to either draw, or what is the story I want to tell? I make that my rough version, whether visually or in outline form. And then I sit down, I think, all right, I try to get out of my own head and say, what is it like for someone to read this? Is this entertaining? And sometimes that does involve sharing that with other people, sharing that with beta readers, sharing that with the writing group and asking other people for feedback. But I think in the end, as a writer, it behooves us all to develop the ability to take ourselves out of our own head and say, what is the experience, to imagine what the experience is to just read that story that you wrote. And then you go back and forth. It's playing, you start playing tennis with it. You bat it over to the reader side of your head and say, well, what would be entertaining? Why would this be entertaining? Why would this, that's stupid, no one's going to read that. And then bat that back to the writer and say, all right, what you wanted to do wasn't entertaining. How can I take this idea and say, either how do I juice it up to make what my initial conceit was more entertaining? Or how do I say, well, this is what would be satisfying to a reader, and how do I make that make more narrative sense? And basically, you just bat that back and forth between the 2 hemispheres of your brain, let's say, until you come to something that is entertaining and logical and satisfying. And if you get 2 out of the 3 is a winning story, it's like good, fast, and cheap.
Well, also, and in a sense, to pick up with Jeremy and I's ongoing conversation about the story grid, because Jeremy introduced me to it, and we've always gone back and forth. I think this is where Sean Coyne is correct in talking about, you have to focus on the genre. What is the genre? What are the key elements of the genre? Because those are the elements that the reader is looking for when they're picking up your work. If it's a and this ties into what I was saying, the medium shapes it. In a film, unless it is a out and out tragedy, yes, the audience is looking for a satisfying end where the good guy wins and the bad guy loses. And that's what shapes the story. Conversely, in a comic book, particularly an ongoing series, no, you don't job a character like Thanos like that, because he's got to come back next month, next year, 3 years down the line. So he's got to walk away. He's got to slink away. He's got to do something where he's not totally defeated. Because in the comics medium for superheroes, the point is to publish the next issue. The point isn't to get $1 billion at the box office. The point is to publish the next issue, and to publish issues 10 years from now. And if the idea is good enough, 20 years from now. And so that changes how you tell the story. Your villains have to actually be meaty and satisfying enough to keep coming back to the Joker. Why is the Joker so satisfying? It isn't just that he's characteristically the opposite of Batman. It's that, you know, this encounter is going to be good, but there's another one coming. Even when it's over and the Joker's defeated, is the Joker coming back next month? Is he coming back next year? Is he coming back 6 months from now? That's the real implicit draw in superhero comics, is when is this guy gonna fight that guy next?
Yeah, I think for me, that's why I like I love superhero comics, and I like the supernatural and the fantasy stuff. But then also I really love horror, because with horror, the villain is the hero, in a sense, and then you have some other like secondary heroes where they may win, and for the audience it may appear like they win, but they really don't, because the villain comes back. And that's sort of like how I look at it with the stories I kind of like, because I like people to go through, I don't know, it may sound kind of bad, kind of like some real adversity, not just
good storytelling.
yeah, not just surface adversity. Because for me, I felt like the first Avengers was kind of surface adversity. They got their butt spanked, but they really didn't lose much. They lost a couple people, but they didn't really lose much. It wasn't like an extreme loss. So for me, I look at it as, if they was extreme loss, knocked down to like maybe a few people, and that was it, and it was really a disparaging situation, then it's like, okay, how are we going to overcome this? We only have 3 people left or whatever. How we're going to have to really use some resources and really do some really deep diving and internally, and whatever things that we got to do to overcome this so we can win. And it's just like, there was so much stuff left open for them to still have vehicles to win. And for me, it just made it too easy. And if you tell stories like that, that makes it too easy for the heroes to come back to win, it just doesn't pay off. And that's just for me, from my perspective. And that's the type of stories I feel like that I want to tell. If I'm going to tell a story, I want someone to just say, okay, oh, I found this magic rock, and now I have the power to win. And it's like, okay, where did it come from? So that's just me. Sometimes I see these movies.
But you know what? Here's the thing, though. Stakes are relative. Stakes are very, very relative. Mm-hmm. Because you're talking about this and characters having, too easy to come back and fighting godlike creatures. You can have a very, very compelling story with stakes that are just about one person's life. You can have a story about a person coming home to visit their estranged father or their estranged mother, and they're dying. They have a terminal illness, and they're dying. And the question is, they're going because they have to. Will they reconcile the relationship, or will they won't? Yeah, that can be a gripping story. It's a very, very human story. Mm-hmm. No cosmic consequences. The world's not going to end if one happens or the other happens. And there's worlds in which people have like an aging parent who's dying, and they're just like, you know what? They were an asshole their entire life. Let them die. I don't care. That happens. That's real. The story could go either way. But it can be dramatic in terms of, are they going to forgive this person? Are they not going to forgive this person? Is this person actually going to be repentant? What happens if they go to visit that person who's dying? That person who's dying isn't asking for forgiveness. They're the same old jerk that they were. How does the protagonist, if we want to go Tenet style, how does the protagonist process that? So the idea of what the stakes are, that is very, very relative. But I think that once you realize that you can play with those kinds of things at all levels in a story, whether it's a person, a family, a superhero team, a military unit, a school class trying to do a fundraiser, a political party, all of those things are rich with opportunity for emotional consequences. And I think that's the thing that we should strive for. And let me this way, this isn't in any way to dispute your criticisms. Your criticisms are valid. But my point is that in a good story, what you should strive for is whether it's going back in time and rewriting history, or whether it's just making peace with somebody, that those emotional stakes are what we should strive for. That's what makes a story powerful.
I agree, because I think that most times when you see really interesting characters, they are created out of like distressing or situations that you just described, and that's the biggest one probably of all time, Batman. That's one of them. They constantly nail that story in your head. That his parents got killed when he was young, and it was a very tragic experience for him, and it spawned the Batman. But it's a lot of really good characters that's created from that. Some of them are not, but a lot of them are created from tragedy. So I agree, you can create whether it's a full-length film, a comic, a short story, whatever, from different situations. And I just wanted to bring that up because I see that a lot of times, especially in these big budget movies. They just throw in stuff just to pay off, and it's sort of like a slap in the face to people that people think better than that. Some people, it may not matter for some because they may be young and they just enjoying the experience, and then some people might just be going to the show or even read a book, just because sometimes people use it as a form of escape. But I always look at myself as one, even though I don't know if it's going to ever happen, that I want to actually create films one day. And when I look at it, I was like, well, if I had $300 million or $100 million or $10 million, would I make the movie like that? And that's what I always look at when I go to movies. I don't look at it just as escapism, unless I'm looking at an action flick or maybe a horror flick. I just go to it. It is what it is. But I'm going to something where it's like, okay, these are characters that people have invested in, that people are all talking about. I kind of look at it like, and then it's something that I guess I'm sort of in a way a part of, because I like comics. I'm not as astute on it as you guys. I'm just more so, I'm an artist, and I grew up drawing comics, not study them in a way where I know a lot of the artists, or I know a lot of the history of it, but I understand the medium. And it's just, the thing is when I look at it, I look at the stories that I want to tell, because a lot of it comes out of your own experience. Regardless of where you pull from, it comes out of your own experience. And a lot of people come from different backgrounds, different experience. And it's just, for me, coming from an adverse experience, I tend to tap into stories that deal with a lot of adversity. Not extreme adversity, but adversity to the point where I want the character to have something to overcome, so that way people that deal with those similar situations, when they overcome that adversity, it's more of a payoff, and it's like, oh man, I really can get into that. So that's just my take on that. But sorry to get into a deep conversation about this.
I was going to mention to you that a book that I know that you don't necessarily read as many the contemporary stuff that's coming out. But I was going to recommend you should look and see if your library has a series that was written by Mark Waid and drawn by Peter Krause. It's called Irredeemable.
I'll write that down.
And the premise of the book is basically, what if Superman turned evil? And it's like 30 odd issues. It ran for a few years. I don't know if it was 30, 40 issues it ran, but
yeah, it's less than 40.
Yeah. And the premise of the series is just like this Superman-like character. He's smarter, stronger, faster than everyone. And he's always one step ahead. And one day, it's like they give you a bunch of his backstory where you see how he gets pushed from being a hero to one day just saying, I'm just going to subjugate humanity because you're all morons and idiots and you aren't worthy of the gifts that I have. And it's the kind of thing where you ask, we've asked in the past, like, thank God Superman's on our side. What would happen if he wasn't? Well, this story explores that. And
is it similar to Red Sun?
You know what? I read Red Sun years ago, and I don't remember much about it. But I thought in Red Sun, he still was a hero, wasn't he?
Yeah, with Red Sun, it's more he's coming at heroism from the perspective of having been raised in Soviet Russia. And so it's more, that story focuses more on U.S. versus Russia kind of politics. And ultimately that Superman learns the lesson of being a good guy for all humanity. With Irredeemable, no, it's Superman basically snapping and going, you know what? No, I can take this thing over.
You did that in Injustice too, right?
Injustice, probably. Yeah, well, a lot of those stories. But with Irredeemable, one of the things about it, now you want to talk about character work, is in a lot of ways, the bulk of the story are all of the other characters trying to take out the Plutonian, which is the Superman analog. It's only about him in retrospect in terms of character study, but it's mostly about how do we take out evil Superman. And so it focuses on so many of the side characters through the course of the story, because in a sense, just like Superman, well, and this is where I was going to go for a second, just like Superman turning evil is, well, he's a god, he's effectively going to subjugate humanity, but ultimately how interesting is that a story to tell, because he's going to essentially win every fight. Irredeemable focused on the side characters fighting against him, because that's where the interest was. With the Weisinger stories for Superman, the challenge was almost in every story a emotional or intellectual conflict that had nothing to do with his powers. You can't punch an intellectual problem. You can't punch an emotional problem. This is why those stories for Superman focused on him. And it's why so many people go, oh, well, you can't tell a story with Superman. Well, you guys are coming at it from a perspective of physical versus physical. And unless it's Superman fighting Doomsday, unless it's Superman fighting Bizarro, he doesn't have a lot of villains that are physical toe-to-toe with him. He's challenged by intellectual problems. He's challenged by emotional problems. That's what I mean. The story dictates the situation, not the character. The story has to challenge the character in ways that they're not prepared for. So they can be overpowered. But I mean, can you imagine? Well, Overlord, the manga. One of the great things about that, given that the character is overpowered, is the narratives have to focus on, well, he doesn't want to be a bad guy, but his underlings treat him as the ultimate bad guy. So they start making moves that put him into the position of how do I keep my underlings, but how do I accept what they've done in my name? And then the romance angle is the other conflict that he has. Hey, I'm a big giant stone skeleton, but I got these chicks throwing themselves all at me. That's another conflict. See, the conflict is not it's not about challenging his abilities. It's about challenging the areas where he's weak.
Okay.
And so that's what good stories should always do. It doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't matter what the character is in terms of their capacity. The story almost always has to challenge them from the opposite direction.
Okay. I have some other things, if you don't mind me sharing, Jeremy.
Oh no, I'm more than happy to. But before we do that, there was a question like 45 minutes ago. Joseph in the chat asked, because I was drawing backgrounds on this page of Morningstar, and let me see, where was the question?
Could you talk about drawings?
Yeah. Let me go up here. Yeah. So he had asked, could you talk about drawing streets and buildings, how it differs from drawing them at night? Like, for example, a lot of my story takes place at 19th century Paris at night. So, I'll let all of you guys take a stab at this, but my first thoughts are simply reference. Reference is where I go to. So if you're drawing 19th century Paris at night, I would just go into Google Images and search 19th century Paris at night and look for photos of the city and do sketches, do like black and white sketches, do them with heavy ink and shadow, do them with wash, so you can figure out totally how much is in silhouette versus light, and you can figure out how much you want strong lighting to affect the scenes. And then once you get a sense of after doing like 2 or 3 just studies of from photos, then you can go through and, for some people, it's a matter of using 3D to set up lighting. For some people, like I always have a bunch of like children's wooden blocks. I have like a set of these, and I'll go through and I will create like maybe not a whole building or a whole city, but I may create these to represent like a city block with like a few different, like maybe I get like 20 different blocks and build them in to something that's similar to a shot that I'm doing. If I'm imagining a building, or let's say an arch going across a river, next to a building, I may set them up like that. And then what I'll do is I'll actually put them on my drawing table, or I'll set them up somewhere in my room. And maybe what I'll do is, we're gonna go shadow mode here. I may turn off like some of the lights and try to get like tonal. Wow, that went real black. I may try to make it look like what this city might look like at night. And I may put on maybe a small light, but put it a distance away. So I will physically try to recreate the lighting scenarios that I'm looking at. So 1 is reference, 2 is using physical objects to recreate the lighting conditions, and then taking photographs of those. And then you've got reference for your shots. So I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add or different approaches.
You said mostly what I would probably do. I would actually go out and take pictures, because you got a camera phone. You can take pictures of, the scenes, because it's not going to change much. It's just how they look. Just take pictures of scenes day and night and see how the light transitions, because everything deals with light. As you was already saying, use Pinterest. That's one place to start. The other thing is, it's so easy to get that type of stuff online without spending a lot of money, so you don't have to really worry about trying to do a lot of thinking, and just buy a 3D model, buy the 3D models, or look for free 3D models, and then you can set it up wherever you want, whatever way you want in a program like Blender. Because for me, it's either 1 or 2 things. You're going to do a lot of research and a lot of thinking to recreate it, and it may not still turn out the way you want. When you can have the reference, it's 1 or 2 things. You're either going to pay with time or you're going to pay with money. So which one you want to do? You want to pay with time or you want to pay with money? If it costs you $50 or $100 to buy a scene that gives you everything you need, and you can light it, turn it at any angle you want, and use it as a reference to build the environment you want for your comic, it's already there. Use that. I know it may not be the most practical way or the most true to artist way, but the thing is it's about getting stuff done. If I had my whole comic, all of my different areas in the universe created 3D, I wouldn't care if the background, if I trace the background. The most important thing is getting it done. Most of the work is going to be focused on is the actual characters. the background is supplemental. It's not really an actor unless the actual background has some sort of key pivotal moment in the story. It's more a supplemental piece. So as long as it looks the way you want it, I would use whatever method it takes to get it done.
Yeah, I would even say, in addition to just reference of photographs, you're talking about 19th century Paris. There's gotta be artists who've done sketches at night of 19th century Paris from that time period. Study them. They are going to be maybe 40 to 50% of your solution set. They've already done that work for you by doing sketches of certain areas of Paris at night in the 19th century. You look at them. How did they solve that problem? How were they lighting it from their perspective live in front of those very buildings? That might give your artwork a freshness rather than just relying on photo reference. We're doing comics, so we're not slavishly slapping the photos onto the page. We are artists are interpreting it. How did that artist interpret what Paris looked like at night? How did a couple of different artists do it? I'm sure Van Gogh or Lautrec or any of the other 19th century Paris artists have to have done sketches of Paris at night. Study those.
Yeah, he just brought up something too, that Assassin's Creed, the Unity game, they did 18th century Paris. So there may already be, like I was saying, models. They got a lot of what they call kit bashing. I don't know if that's the right term. It probably is kit bashing, where you can find different elements where you can put together your own kit that'll give you that rendition of it. And yeah, I do agree, like what you said, Vince, it give it that more authentic look from that. But I feel like you can combine that with the 3D as well, because you have the look, you can get the look as far as the style, and then you can get the perspective and the positioning of how you want. Because a lot of times what happens when we're trying to draw stuff, and Jeremy can also attest to this as well, when you try to draw stuff, it takes a lot of figuring out. It's like, okay, how the character's going to stand here with the camera pointed this way, and how I'm going to draw that. So it's a lot of figuring out. If you can eliminate some of that, you can have more enjoyment and just creating a comic. Because a lot of times you spending most of the time trying to focus on this character, and you don't want to really focus on, okay, I got to draw this background, I got to rotate the camera this way. It's like, okay, I want to get this done. So what's the fastest way to get it done? And if you can find a way to do that, that whatever way that takes, I think that's the approach you should take.
Reference is your friend.
Reference is your friend, but if it sells, if the image sells what you're trying to convey in terms of mood, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. That's the main thing. So I would say that would be the main thing, is don't overthink how to make it look good, or accurate rather. Make it look good. Does it sell it? Good. Move on to the next panel.
Yeah.
Unless you're a nut like me and you want to go back and redraw stuff because you don't like the anatomy.
Yeah, overthinking and perfection kill a lot of enthusiasm.
But see, to be fair, if I had done my due diligence and properly shot reference beforehand, I wouldn't have had this problem.
But I always go back to that. I love Dave Sim. His guide to self-publishing is really a Bible that a lot of independent creators need to read, not just for the publishing information, but because his analysis on his own process is so powerful. There's that whole bit where he tells that story about working a hand, where he shared a studio with Gene Day, and he said that at some point Gene Day came over and took a look at it and basically said, it's a Dave Sim hand. It's how you draw a hand. Move on to the next thing. You have to embrace that you're just going to do something away. If it doesn't look legit, but it sells it, keep moving. Keep moving. The goal is to produce the pages, not to get it perfect. Because there's Jeremy, you were mentioning earlier about somebody calling you out on your plot holes. If they don't notice it, that means you did your job to entertain them so that they don't call on the plot holes. Everything has plot holes. Look, we live in reality. Reality is unfinished. There are things about reality that don't make no damn sense. If you really try to think about it that way. And essentially, so essentially, if you're not glaring in your potholes, if you simply go, look, don't look here, as long as you're not like bad about it, readers are going to forgive you if something doesn't make 100% sense. If you've entertained them, they bought it. Keep moving.
Agreed.
Keep moving.
So I know, Amar, you said that you had a couple of other things you wanted to show. I was going to mention that I had a list of 6 goals. I only mentioned the first 2.
Well, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say I could mention one more, and then I was going to figure out how long you guys want to go, because we're at an hour and a half now. I'm fine for going for another half hour if that's respectful to your time. You let me know how your guys' time is.
I mean, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I'll check in with you guys at the 2-hour mark, and we'll decide if we have anything else we want to talk about, or whether we want to cap it. But it's funny, we totally got away from the goals. Everybody says, "Oh wait, I didn't talk about none of that." So one of my goals also copies Amar's, in the sense that my goal was going to be to write for 30 minutes a day, every day. Because for me, the biggest thing I find is that I finish a big project like Morningstar. Like when I finished Eye of the Gods, I didn't start my next comic book. I published Eye of the Gods in 2009. I didn't put out my sketchbook for Morningstar until sometime in mid-2010, saying that it was coming in 2011. But there was like a good year gap, at least, between that and the next series while I was doing some writing. And I also found when I went and redid some rewrites on Morningstar that I took at the halfway point of the series, I stopped and I spent about 2 or 3 months rewriting the second 4 issues. And I realized that if I write every day, then I'm not going to have this thing where I stop and then I have to rebuild those writing muscles. And that way, it's like if I'm touching something every day and I'm just working, it doesn't matter whether I'm working on the next comic or when the next comic is like bulletproof and I've got it like outlined, scripted, dialogue, rewrites, just keep doing that until I feel like I can't make this any better. Then I just move on to a new project. That way I always have something ready for me to draw at any point when whenever I'm finished writing. So that way I won't have the thing where I've got like long of a gap between when I'm finishing a series and starting a new one. So that was next on my list.
Yeah, I think if you can get all of the ideas concepted and written out the way you want, and everything is organized, and all you have to do is draw it, it'd probably be a lot easier. Because for me, I know if I had everything that I have, and we've had this conversation a little bit before, if I had all those ideas written out and it was all copyrighted and everything was taken care of, then all I had to do was worry about drawing it. And then if I felt like that was a problem, then I can probably find somebody else to draw it. Because really, to be honest with you, and I don't know if you guys share this vantage point with me, I feel like I'm at the stage if I go out there and hit, like, I don't know if it's still there, at 600 or at $400 million lottery, I would just be a producer. Because that's all I really want to be right now anyway. I just want to be a producer. I don't want to have to think about doing all this writing, have to do all this drawing, this animating, creating games. I just want to produce. I don't care if it's successful or if it's really successful or it fails. I just want to get these ideas out of my head. So if I can get them all out of my head and then people can enjoy them, or they can berate them or do whatever they want, then I can move on to the next set of ideas that I have. And that's really where I'm at, and I would love to be able to do that. And if I can get these things produced and then move on, I feel like I I would be able to go to the next level. I feel like right now at this point, I have so much stuff bubbling at the surface that once that stuff is out into the universe and it's doing and it's living its own life, then I can start doing the other things that I want to do, because it feels like I have 20 or more years of stuff that's just bubbling and it needs to get out there.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of writing in particular, yeah, it's hard to get back into the muscles. Something I've always toyed with was from Natalie Goldberg's book, Writing Down the Bones, which is free writing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just 10 minutes of just writing about anything. And it's actually really good. You know, as artists, you guys are familiar with the idea of doing the warm-up sketches or doing the cool-down sketches. That's what free writing is for writing. It's just you show up. Maybe there's a small prompt. Her book has got a ton of them. You just, you know, what's the quality of light coming through your window at the time of writing? And you start off with that. Or I am, and you fill in the blank. And you just write for just 10 minutes straight. I have found that that's actually a good way of keeping the writing muscles good, because I don't have a specific place where I'm going. I'm not necessarily thinking about a project or character development or how to plot this thing. A lot of times that's what systems and structures are for anyway, is it kind of, it shifts your thinking to being creative. I mean, you know, for anything short or quick, I always go to the Lester Dent master plot. That thing is as flexible as all get out, but it makes sure that you get through the points that you need. Mm-hmm. But in terms,
I don't think I've heard of the Lester Dent master plot. Let me write that down.
Dude, so Lester Dent was the guy who wrote most of the Doc Savage novels. Mm-hmm. And he was a pulp writer of that era. And he put together a thing he called as the master plot, a basic story done in 4 parts. It's so simple a system, yet it's so profound. This is the system that Michael Moorcock used to generate all of his early novels. Like in 3 days, he could knock out a full novel based off of using the Lester Dent plot system. Now, of course, we're talking shorter novels. We're talking about 50 to 70,000 words. But the point is in 3 days, using this system, you can knock it out. It's what I use to put Total Recall together.
Well, it makes sense because it has a pulp. Total Recall has a sci-fi pulpy feel to it.
Yeah, and part of why I did that is I had speaking of Mark Waid, I had the suspicion, based on his Captain America run, that he was using the Lester Dent system as a way to plot the bulk of the stories. Mm-hmm. And so when I got the assignment to do Total Recall, I decided that was going to be my experiment. I was going to experiment with, could you use this as a simple system, just adapt it? Okay, it's in 4 parts. I got 4 issues, boom, 1 part per issue, and used it as an organizing system. And it's really quick and simple. And it makes sure that the story keeps moving forward. I don't think I used it as well as I could have, because that was my first time playing with it. But that, too, is another kind of exercise to play with, is to just pull that system out, because it's villain focused primarily. It is where you start off with. You start off with what the villain's problems are, or what the villain wants. And then from there, that's what structures the story. All the way down to the hero having to pull the fat out of the fire by the last part. But between that and free writing, those things really do free up more of the imagination in terms of, okay, I don't have to think about what I'm writing. I have to think about what goes in what place, or what plays around with this. Or if I'm doing, you know, what's the quality of light, I can just sort of describe that and let that work on the writing, you know, let the writing happen without having it to go anywhere. And I think between those two kinds of tools, that's what keeps storytelling feeling fresh.
Is it still in print, the book you're talking about?
No, it's not in print, but you can find, there's a website called the Dirty 30s that has a copy of the Lester. Just put in Google Lester Dent master plot formula. Then you'll get a couple of different takes on it. A lot of writers swear by it, particularly in science fiction circles. But it's just a good, simple system that is a great way to get started putting together a story. Much simpler than Hero's Journey, much simpler. In a lot of ways, it's even simpler than Sean Coyne's story grid method in a lot of ways, but it covers some of the same territory.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the fact that what's appealing to me when you lay it out that way is just the fact that I've spent most of my life learning and continuing to learn how to draw. I'm continually working on the picture making craft. And it was when even though I feel like I told a decent story with my first graphic novel that I published, that's when I realized, oh, okay, if I'm going to continue to be a writer-artist, I need to put at least as much time into developing my craft as a writer as I have as being an artist.
Yeah.
And the idea of just like, it's almost like journaling. I mean, artists do that too. There's tons of art prompts where people just say, hey, we're going to draw this and post it on Instagram with this hashtag. Like, and being able to approach writing with that same point of just having a prompt and say, all right, I'm just going to make something. And maybe it's not that you make it and share it online. You just make it and then see, oh, it's like having a sketchbook. It's just like, I'm going to try to do a study of this and a study of that, a study of this emotion, a study of this scene, a study of this conversation. There's studies. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's why I like writing down the bones as a book. Now that one you can still find is her approach. She has such a Zen approach to writing, and I think for creators crafting story, it's the anxiety of the blank page. I think even more so than for an artist, because for any artist, if you've got a pen or a pencil in your hand and you've got the blank page in front of you, at the bare minimum, you can start with a doodle and then build into something to draw. When it's the blank page or the blank screen for a writer and you don't have a place that you know where you're going, that can be really daunting. And that's what a lot of what Goldberg's book is about, is getting over that fear of the empty space by essentially putting a Zen spin on it and going, well, the empty space is your head anyway.
I love that.
And so once you realize your head is empty, then you can kind of play around with writing, and that it doesn't, her whole thing is, oh, well, these free writings, they don't have to be perfect. You can journal and you can write in it in the morning, you write it in the evening, play around with, and she builds your confidence up in a different route by basically going, well, play around with this. We'll write about that. Well, here, I'm going to tell you about my experience doing this. And maybe you'll want to write about something similar. And so that whole book is just a great sort of, it gives you a lot of good tools to work with. And so that, that free writing is really a great thing to play around with. I'll tell you, when I was doing the Omnium Gatherum column, a lot of times that's where some of the ideas came from, was I was doing a free writing for something else, and then there would be a sentence that would kick out, and then suddenly that becomes an idea.
A whole column fills out of that, huh?
And a whole column would then grow out of that. Mind mapping is another way to get out of your own way of just sort of, okay, my basic idea is this, and you just write it in the center of the paper and put a circle around it. Then you start putting lines into other circles of lines coming away from that, going, well, okay, this is the starting point. Well, what happens next, or what goes with this? Oh, well, this goes this goes this. And next thing you know, you fill the whole page full of small notes, all deriving from a central idea. Well, now you just have to organize it. And that too, and then that too also keeps writing feeling creative, because you're not just slavishly going, okay, here's the next sentence, and here's the next sentence, and here's the next sentence. No, I'm mind mapping this, and so I'm letting it be free and loose. And maybe here's an idea. If you put cats in the studio as the centerpiece, let's say. Well, you know, cats in the studio. Well, first thing comes off of that is nothing but trouble. And then, you know, but maybe they do this, or maybe you can play around with mind mapping to put an idea together as well. You know, writing wise, and that too keeps your writing fresh. You know, I'm a sucker for systems. You know, and particularly I'm a fan of the pulps. So when some idiot reprinted the Plot Genie, I had to get those. Those things are fun. Those things are so old school, but they can generate a great idea depending on the genre, in the sense of it just gives you the big building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's this character, male character this, female character that, locale is this. Here's the problem. Here's how the problem gets worse. Here's how the problem gets worse. Here's the crisis. Here's the climax. Here's the resolution. Oh, well, once all those things are plugged in, how do I connect those dots? You know, that too becomes a way of freeing up the imagination. Because I think as storytellers, as writers, that's the real problem, is what's the next sentence? How does this flow? Talking about plot holes. How do I keep a plot hole from happening because I think things should progress this way, but maybe they needed to go this way, or, oh, I didn't take this into account. Mm-hmm. You know, some of these systems kind of guide you in the directions that make sure that you don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jeremy, it looks like John.
Oh, John Ersick's in the chat. John's there. John is part of so Amar, we have a group in LA called Coffee and Comics. It's sort of a creatives social group, and John is a member, as is Jesse. Zeus Tova is in the chat. So they popped in to say what's up, and Jen says hi. She's also a member, and she comes with John, and you know, John mentioned. Well, here, I'll just throw it up there. Yeah. You know, he said, Jen says hi. We're popping in and out. Missing Aroma Cafe. So we may have to look at you know. Jesse also popped in. We need to have a virtual aroma meetup. So we did one of those before, and I think we're probably due to schedule another one. And maybe this one time we'll try to mix up the some of the people that weren't, because it's a wide ranging group of people. There's been as many as like 30 people filling up the patio of Aroma Cafe. Sometimes it's been an intimate gathering. So maybe we can get in some of the folks who weren't in the last one next time we do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I think the main thing is to try to circle back to goals. I think the implicit goal for any creator is, how do I improve this year? How do I make what I do this year better than last year? Is ultimately the goal we're all striving for. You know, does that mean I have to produce more work? Does that mean I need to do more practice? I think you'll figure that out. But the main goal is always, how do I do this thing better? That's why I was saying the Plot Whisperer, my exploration with that is one of those ways where I'm like, yeah, I'm isolated, so that I'm not really going to have a writer's group where I can go, hey, you know, can somebody read that I'm doing this female character justice, or that I took care of this? But if I have a plotting system that I can work with that sort of incorporates that viewpoint, it makes things simpler. You know, it cuts to a lot of chase. It reminds me, well, speaking of Coffee and Comics, that's why, like, I shared that little booklet, Writing Between Men and Women, because that little booklet is a really great example of, it's essentially by a romance novelist, and she boils down generic ways that men and women behave differently under certain circumstances. And it's a quickie reference. So if I write a female character and she's telling people what to do, I go, does that make sense? I go back to this book and it's all like, well, no, that may not necessarily be the standard female way, or a standard way a woman would handle a situation. Oh, okay, I can correct that. It's
a good reference.
You know, And so it makes it simple. Same, and so it allows you. These are the tools that we figure out. But again, it boils back to the implicit goal. How do I do what I do better?
Yeah. Go ahead, Amar.
No, I was just gonna say, if you don't mind, I was gonna share the projects that I'm working on for this year that I'm gonna try to. Well, I will get done.
All right. Do you want me to put your screen up or?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, of course.
Okay, so this is the one that I was sharing on your Discord. This is for a cartoon series. They probably gonna be used more so for reference, but this is it's gonna be a 2D cartoon, but these are the 3D characters that I've created so far for the series. It's called The Simpletons. So I'm just scrubbing through these here. These are all the characters. There's 14 of them. So this is one of the projects. The other one is this music video that I'm working on. It's an animated music video. This is the cast. Of course, they're going to be more. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong thing. So this is the character sheet, the main characters. And then this is I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see the characters a little better. So these are like the vocalists that's in the music video. And then these are the DJs. I gave them different names instead of just DJs. So these are some of the characters. I already started the storyboards. When I get that done for the animatic, I share that with you. What else? This is, of course, the comic that I am working on that I shared on your Discord. So I'm working on this as well. I'm only on the 4th page. Unfortunately, I have 7 more pages to do. It's like a 90-page book. So I got to do the thumbnails for this.
Is this the one that's also available to read right now on Tapas or Webtoons?
No, this is the 2nd issue that I'm working on. So this one's going to be 90 pages, and then I got to jump right into the 3rd one because the 3rd one I'd already had finished that script. So then I got to start on the 4th script so I can do that one. But I don't expect that one to be 90 pages. I think this one's 90 pages because I'm doing like a dual story. I don't know what they call it, the correct term in comics, but it's when you are telling like a primary and secondary story.
Parallel narratives.
Okay. So what's happening in this story is you have Snow going through his trials and tribulations of learning his powers. That's told in conjunction with this story of Lilith going on this mission for Samael. So she's going on this mission for Samael, and that's what's being told in parallel with both of these stories in this one. I was thinking I probably should split it off into two books, but the stuff that's going on with Snow is not really as interesting as the stuff that's happening with Lilith. So I figured it shouldn't really be it'd probably be like a mini book if I was to do it like that. But it's basically him just doing destructive stuff like a kid would do, trying to learn how to use his abilities. So it's not really much going on there. He's just dealing with the learning pains of growing and learning how to use his abilities. I'm still roughing out these characters. I think I'm going to give off these cover designs to someone else because I've been fighting that for a while. What else? I've been working on the redesign so I can get more familiar with my characters. I was working on that on a stream the other day. So I've been trying to redesign the character since he's kind of young to make it easier for me to draw. So I'm going to do some more of that practice work to try to refine the character to get it embedded to memory, because a lot of times when you're drawing characters, if you make them too complicated, what ends up happening is, especially unless you draw them for like years, these characters are still new. So I got to figure out ways to simplify the design to make it easier for me to remember. And you do that a lot with animation, but I think I'm getting closer to it with what I was practicing the other day, because you've probably seen other iterations of this character. And I think this one, the way the face looks, it gives him more of a younger look, even though he has a man body. The same thing with Lilith over here. So I'm working on that. What else do I have? Do I have anything else on here? I think that's mostly it, but I do have other stuff that I'm working on. I'm going to stop. You can either keep me sharing or you don't have to keep sharing, but I have another cartoon that I'm working on. It's going to be working with, what's the term? Keep forgetting this term, but it's used a lot when people are going back and forth ad hominem. That's it. So I have another cartoon series I want to work on called Not Sad Sad Guy. So when people hear that, when I use that term, sometimes people say, "Oh, so you're working on a bipolar character." It's not really intentionally targeted towards that, but I was figuring that it might be something kind of cool to work on, and it's basically targeting art related terms. So I have this written down, and I want to do that. I want to work on this cartoon as well. It's going to be like really short, but the main one that I want to focus on is the one that I showed you for the Simpletons, and then also the music video. Those are the bigger ones that I need to work on outside of the comic book stuff. And we talked about this before too, working on doing some art. So these are like a couple pieces that I got to finish still. I got to still finish this He-Man that I was working on.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I got to work on this. I've been putting it on hold, and then this Ultraman one, I got to finish this one too. So there's still quite a bit of work left on that. And I'm gonna do more of this stuff so I can start building something that I can put in my I wouldn't say portfolio, but something I can build prints for. So I don't think this is going to be print material, but I'm going to work on at least 10. That was the goal for this year, to get at least 10 that I can use as print related materials to sell for people that might be interested in that type of artwork. So, and then build on that. So that's pretty much the goal for this year. Of course, there's other stuff thrown in there.
You have a pretty full, ambitious plate.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, usually one of the things is I recognize that it's probably not great to do multi-year projects until you're at the point where you don't have to worry about until you get to the point where the income on whatever else you've done is regular enough, and you have enough of a fan base that you can survive off of that. Because the upside for me has been that my goal is always the same. Like Vince will tell you, when we had coffee comics in person, we usually would have a theme every month, and then anybody who brought their sketchbook or brought whatever would do some sketches or some pieces, and sometimes we post them on the Facebook group. My theme was always Morningstar, because no matter what we're doing, I'm working on my comic.
Yeah. Well, but that's not an impediment. I think, look, we can look at the history of comics, let's say, and you can have a Jack Kirby who created everything. Mm-hmm. You could have someone like an Eisner who created a lot of stuff, but is primarily known for the spirit. Or you could have someone like an Al Cap, who's basically known for Little Abner, Dave Simmons, Cerebus. Some people are one idea guys. Some people are a million idea guys. The main thing. Yeah. See, the main thing is you have to find the creative endeavor that gets you up in the morning. I think I will say that for 2020, one of the things that really helped me in terms of was the fact that I had the boat in the basement, and here was a set of circumstances where my going out was radically reduced, and I could finally look at this idea and start playing around with where the story is, where it's going, how am I innovating with it. And then that forced me to get into things like studying Japanese storytelling, because I got the crazy idea that I wanted a subplot, but I wanted it plotted using exactly what a manga creator would use. And so that forced me to start studying Kisho Tenketsu, the basic Japanese or really Eastern Asian kind of way of storytelling. And it's just different enough that it gives things a different flavor, but it's not so extraordinarily different that I couldn't really grasp it. But it did take going through a couple of different books and finally going, okay, this guy says this guy says that. The answer is somewhere in between these two. Where the Japanese guy didn't give a great long form explanation, but I was able to grasp what the primary point was. But this American guy goes into this long form explanation that goes so far afield, but I could see where it ties back into what the Japanese guy said. And so that's been interesting as a process and getting that integrated into this whole system. And to see that goes to the idea of always improving. I think last year I learned a lot more about storytelling from different ideas, different perspectives. And that helped me move forward. And it's just putting it into practice. But aside from, having my go-tos, like I did a short story last year, and that was all Lester Dent. It was a 12-pager, and the Lester Dent master plot, I could stick it right on there, and it kept me focused and got me through producing the script in a fairly timely manner, kind of thing. And so we're always experimenting. We're always playing around with things. We know what works, but we should be looking to find new things. Even if we're only doing one idea, if we can put new things into that one idea, like there's a film series on YouTube by a Doctor Who fan, and he does doctor by doctor review and analysis. And he really gets into, okay, well, when we got to the second Doctor, they evolved this set of kinds of stories that they were telling. Well, by the end of his run, they had kind of exhausted that kind of story. So now when the next Doctor came in, the producers learned from the previous guys and they started doing this kind of story. And it is fascinating to see through this guy's analysis how one character went through multiple hands and how each hand changed what they did, but how they kept it relevant.
So both updating the character while trying to maintain the thread, the core of the character.
Keeping to the core concept. Yeah, particularly like when he gets to the Russell T Davies revival and how he talks about Davies was a fan, but Davies wanted to reintroduce the show by stripping it down to the basics. And this is why the Eccleston season ran the way that it did. It was designed specifically from the outset to strip the idea of Doctor Who back down to its very basic concept. Guy in a blue box, wandering around, saving people. But that getting back to that basic formula is how it's sold to so many people. And so studying those, for example, and that reminds you that, even if you're just one creator, I've gotten into the idea that if you're a solo creator, you don't have the Hollywood advantage of a writer's room directly, but you do indirectly. Why? Number one, you have a library. If you have a library of either the comics you've loved or books you've loved and whatnot, they become part of your writer's room. They become the inspiration. They become the people that, let's face it, you steal from. You make sure you file off the serial numbers quite correctly, but they're the ones you steal from. They're the ones that and in a sense, that's what the solo creator has in it as their advantage is the people that they love. And even if they just included a couple people that they don't like, how do they tell stories in a way that, you don't, back to the plot whisperer. I don't think I would have told or have ideas like she presents, but she's part of my writer's room now in the sense that I have that book to refer to. And so that gets back to that implicit goal of always changing what you do. So you can have just one idea and explore it for the rest of your life if you at least go, okay, I think I've gotten boring doing it this way. How would this guy approach it? Or oh man, I just saw this guy. I just watched Avengers Endgame for the second or third time, and man, did they just job Thanos. Okay, how would I tell that story differently? That's the value of those things.
You could honestly, like, in the same way as doing one character over and over again, you could say exploring one premise over and over again, because more than once I've had the thought, what if I were doing Superman? What would I do? Not trying to take over DC, but if I were doing an alien visitor from another planet whose superpower comes to Earth. And I have come up with 4 or 5 different graphic novel premises based on that idea. And you could honestly just say, I'm gonna explore this trope through different things. You can explore it as a romance story, and then do another version that's a horror story, and do it with different characters, and just explore the trope, or explore the genre. Yeah. Well, Strange Adventures from Another Planet kind of, I think it treads the line between genre and trope.
No. You're mixing different archetypes with different genres. Superman is an archetype. He's the paragon. What does a paragon do in a Regency romance? What do you do with a paragon in a dark fantasy story? What do you do with a paragon in a horror story? Starting off with that kind of question can send you off.
Yeah, you can go forever on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Particularly because, look, Superman, there was a great website that I found because I'm a Buddhist. I had this weird idea. How does Buddhism look at Superman? And I found this odd website that's just simple page. And the guy basically explores the whole idea that Superman is essentially a prisoner of his own dharma. which what I thought was so weird yet profound to take, that essentially because Superman is what he is as a character, he is always doomed to be Superman. He can never advance through spiritual circles. But you know what was funny is I read that website a few years after Neil Gaiman's, whatever happened to Superman. And that's essentially the argument he makes there. What's your reward for being Batman? Oh, you get to be reborn as Batman. but that spiritualizes a corporate reality. As long as there is a entity that owns DC Comics, whether it's DC Comics, Time Warner, or AT&T, there will be a Batman. There has to be.
Hey, Jeremy. Joseph had a question about the Discord.
Oh, yeah. I saw that. I was gonna. So Joseph, the Discord server is actually just for Patreon subscribers. So even if you want to subscribe at the pay what you want level, they have it set up so you can join for $2, but you can join for whatever amount you want. But just the banners. Yeah, if you hop over to patreon.com/GERIMI, that is where you can go to join up. And then we have a Patreon, we have a Discord server just for patrons on Patreon. We share works in progress, talk process. We share resources and both art tools, reference tools, that whole thing. So sort of like an extension, very similar to the conversations we're having here. We're having those conversations throughout the month on the Discord server in text. So if you want to check it out, you can head on over to there. And actually, we've been going for over 2 hours now. So I think this is a good time. Guys, I have to tell you, this is the reason why I wanted to have you both on. Because I knew that it would stop being it would stop being presentational and just be 3 creatives talking. And I mean, obviously, you guys know that I can sit here and just extemporize for hours on my own. But it is nice to be doing this and having you guys here and just having this conversation and the free flow of ideas.
Mm.
So real quick, if you guys, I'm going to drop the screens off and go back to just us, triplet mode. And Amar, you've got a black square on yours, but we know you're there. So Vince, is there any place that you want to direct anybody to check you out on social media or what have you?
Well, I mean, I'm on Facebook, Vince Moore. I also have a blog spot that is sitting there. I really need to get back. 2021, if I have to make a new goal, is I have to make that the archive for the old Omnium Gatherum columns as I fix them. It's papadakabraxis.blogspot.com. Whenever I do make an update, that'll be where it'll be. And people can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Twitter, @papadakabraxis. If they want to message me, particularly for editorial services, I am a reasonably priced, reasonably knowledgeable individual to work with for script doctoring, editing, just even asking general questions. Those are the places that they can reach me.
So people want your own personal plot whisperer. You can come to this board and he will whisper to your plot and he will say, "You're broken."
No. What we do, or what I do, is I go, okay, here's where it works. Here's where I don't think it works. Maybe, speaking about balancing between the reader and the creator, a good editor is the reader's advocate. I have to ask those dumb questions. How does this work? Do you really think this makes sense? That's the value.
I wanted to ask before we, I know you was wrapping up, Jeremy, but I wanted to ask Vince, what was the contact that you said again for your editorial services? Because I may need to reach out to you for that.
You can contact me through Facebook, Vince Moore. Just look for this mug with a cat.
Hey, Vince, you want to type in your contacts on the chat, and I'll throw up on the screen real quick.
Yeah, I can do that. Let me.
And while Vince is doing that, Amar, if you want to type in yours in the chat also, we'll come to you. I'll throw whatever social media you want on the screen real quick.
It's everything with the name that you see there in that bar, Art with Amar B. That's it. I tried to make everything simple. That's why I use that name, Art with Amar B. That's everything.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm probably going to have to put it in the private chat.
No, you can put it in the public chat. Oh, wait, that's right. It'll block it if it puts in the private. Yeah, put it in the private chat, and I'll throw it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the private chat. So probably Twitter is going to be the simplest. So let's do it.
Oh, man, that's cesspool. No, I'm sorry.
You know what? I only share Buddhist stuff there. So quite honestly, and then I'll put my Gmail, because that is usually how a lot of people get a hold of me.
All right, I'll go there and follow you now, and then I'll DM you about it, because
okay.
It'll be interesting. I do have another friend that I share some stuff with. That's another artist, and I don't think I shared the most recent one with you, Jeremy. But I know you're kind of busy, so not saying that no one else is, but I just be great to get I would say a person to just focus on writing opinion as well. So.
So if you guys want to check out Vince on Twitter, you can go to papadakabraxis. And then if you want to email him, papadakabraxis@gmail.com for all of your editorial story advocate needs.
Yes.
All right.
I just followed you as well. So.
Okay.
Okay. And Amar, everything is Art with Amar on all the socials?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then in that case, so for you guys, I want to thank you both so much for coming on, for having this fun, great conversation. You know, you guys have been on before. You've always welcome to be back again anytime. I love having you on. For the viewers, again, as Joseph mentioned, we have a Discord for Patreon subscribers. So if you want to head on over to patreon.com/GERIMI, you know, that's where you can support this live stream. You can get additional bonus live streams. At this point, I'm doing more Patreon exclusive live streams than I am the regular ones, because I've been replacing my Monday night figure drawing classes with doing Monday night art book study group. And right now we're currently working our way through George Bridgman's complete guide to drawing from life. So I'm doing a study on there, and we just get on every night. I get on there for like 2 hours. So they're this length, but it's just figure drawing.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And for people who want to see, there's plenty of, I take like some of the highlights and clips from that. And I post them in the regular YouTube channels. You can see that as well. For people who want to sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net, that way you can just see some of the various things I post online. So I'm always posting throughout the week. This way I take the best of my social medias, usually one of the live streams for the month, pages from Morningstar that I'm working on, all of that. You can just get that delivered right to your inbox, one simple, easy peasy place. And again, if you want to purchase physical copies of my comics, as I showed earlier, you go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. So to you again, Amar and Vince, thank you so much for showing up. To everyone in the chat and for everyone who's watching the replay, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. You guys make it worthwhile to create, because you're such a vibrant, lovely community. And I enjoy sharing my process here with you. Thank you so much. That's it for now. Go